Our Father, we're grateful for your presence here with us again today, and knowing that not only here with us as we gather, but present in each one of us through faith and trust in your Son. And we're grateful for the relationships that you offer to us. Lord, we just sang a couple songs of what it means to let you be Lord in our life, and to surrender all to you. And when we don't know what we're doing or where we're going, that's easier for us to just trust you because we don't have anything else. Then when things come into our lives, we have desires and interests and things, and those tend to become our focus, and we tend to take control. And Lord, you know what that does to us. But I'm grateful that you are patient with us, that you are persistent in your pursuit of us, that your love embraces us and protects us and leads us on. And I'm just grateful, Lord, for just your commitment to us. Help us to be responsive in our commitment back to you, Lord. Thank you for the story of Ruth and just the things that took place in her life and the evidence of your hand in her life, that we might learn from her today. So we just thank you for this time. We're grateful for your Spirit. Speak to us, Lord, and teach us. We come in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right. Well, I have been choosing men out of the Old Testament. I did choose one woman, Esther, and we looked at Esther one Sunday that was here. I've considered some other women too as well, because I didn't want the women of being present here feeling left out with all my examples from the men. But interestingly enough, there's lessons to be learned from the men for all of us, as there are lessons here in the life of Ruth for all of us menfolk too. So we'll see where all this takes us today. I'm going to start just with a little bit of background to the book of Ruth. It's only 4 chapters. It's very small. And it's one of 2 books in the Bible that have a woman's name attached to it, the book of Esther and the book of Ruth. And the story of Ruth took place about 100 years before David became king. If that places her in history here. And the writer of Ruth is likely Samuel, who was the priest who anointed David as king. And so I'm guessing that Ruth was probably still alive when Samuel was around. And Samuel was the one who recorded her life and her story. And the other thing I wanted that I didn't realize, I'm not Jewish, so I don't have this history, but the book of Ruth is held in very high regard among the Jews. It is one of only 5 books of the Old Testament, scrolls in the Old Testament, that are read each year at special occasions. Ruth is read at Pentecost. That's 50 days after the Passover, what we regard Easter. It is an annual celebration of the barley harvest, which we'll find plays a pretty key role in Ruth's life. Its content also is significant in that it confirms the ancestral lineage of the Messiah from Abraham to David. And so here in Ruth we will see the sovereignty of God, both in the nation of Israel and in the lives of individuals. And we can learn from that, from her particularly. And Ruth's story, Jason read it already for us, excerpts from verses 1 through 22. Just a quick summary here of the story of Ruth is that Elimelech and Naomi, a married couple, left Judah. Now, Judah, by the way, is just south of Jerusalem. And the primary city in Judah, at least in our story today, is Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is 5 miles from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It's just south in the hills. And that's where they raised all the sheep that were sacrificed in the temple. And it was the place of sheep. And it's interesting that that was the place that Jesus was born, who became the Lamb of God for us, the sacrifice for us, paying the penalty for all the judgment that could come against us. But anyway, our story is here. Elimelech and Naomi left Judah for Moab, which is south. It would be to the east, down the mountain from Jerusalem to the River Jordan Valley, and just below that is the Dead Sea. And south of the Dead Sea is a landscape known as Moab. And so they left Judah for Moab because there was a famine in the land. There was a lack of food, the crops, it was a dry spell in the climate. So they left Judah for Moab. And they had 2 sons, and while they were there in Moab, they married women from Moab. And after the 2 sons got married, Dad, Amalek, died. And so 10 years later, the 2 sons who were married, they also died. And so we have the story here that Naomi is left by herself with 2 daughters-in-law. And then the story goes on, the famine passes in Judah, so God is providing crops and everything for the people, and Naomi decides to return to Judah. And she tells her daughters-in-law to stay and remain with their families there in Moab and find husbands there in Moab. And one of the daughters-in-law said, okay, I'll do that. But Ruth insisted that she was going to leave and go with Naomi. And so Ruth returns to Judah with Naomi, and that whole conversation about what Ruth was going to do, Ruth said this to Naomi in chapter 1, verse 16. Ruth said, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. Severely, if any, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you from me." Now, that was a pretty significant commitment on her part. And we can see Ruth's devotion in this pledge that she's making to Naomi. But I don't know if you happen to recognize from her comments here, Ruth said, do you recognize the wedding vows that we often repeat here today? To death do we part. You know, I'm committing to you today till I'm dead. And don't kill me. No. But I just thought just the influence of Ruth's statement is these thoughts are expressed in the vows that happen in weddings today here. Like how many thousand years later? So we learn from this that one of the characteristics of Ruth is that she was a devoted person. And so Naomi returns to her hometown, Bethlehem in Judah, with Ruth. And Naomi is not the same person who left 10 years before. Life has been very difficult for her. Her husband died, and then her 2 sons died. In Bethlehem, Naomi tells her old friends, "Don't call me Naomi," which means delightful. She told them, "Call me Mara," which means bitter. Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. And so, to whom does she place blame for the difficulties in her life? God. And I said, that happens to us when difficulty overwhelms us, when our dreams are shattered. We tend to cope by placing blame outside of ourselves. And like Naomi, we often blame God. So I just say, keep listening today and see what God does in Naomi's life. Naomi and Ruth arrive in Judah with nothing, with no food. And so what does Ruth do? In chapter 2, verse 2, Ruth says to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." And Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So Ruth said, we need food. And it was the practice of the Jews, and practice today here in Southern California, that there's a harvest and you send the crews out there to harvest the crop, but they don't, there's some things they left because they aren't perfect or aren't of the right quality, and you can come back afterwards and pick what's left behind and take. That's called gleaning. And there are people who glean here in just south of us in Orange County, out in the fields. And there are organizations who work with the owners of fields to allow their group of people to come in and follow behind the harvest and pick up what's left over. And then that food is distributed among people who can't afford to buy. And that's what Ruth did. She went out to a field where there was harvesting going on, and she started gleaning grain for food. And I don't know if you've been around harvesting of wheat or barley or grains. The stalk of the crop grows up to various heights like this, but at the top there's clusters of seeds, the wheat seeds or the barley seeds, and they come in and with a sickle they cut the sheaf, the staff of the crop. They collect those, and then they take them to a place where they process them. And they beat the sheaves, and all the seeds fall out, and they collect the seeds then. And that's the harvesting that takes place. And then they do a thing they call winnowing, which is they throw the seeds up in the air, and the outer husk around the seed falls off. And so you have the seed that you can cook and eat and process for food. But that's what Ruth went to do. She went out and followed them as they were cutting the sheaves of barley, and she was collecting sheaves for herself. And then she processed those and made seeds, collected the seeds, and took them home to Ruth, to Naomi. But anyway, so she's out gleaning in a field. And we learned from this that she was a woman who took initiative. Ruth was responsible and resourceful. We need food. I'm going to go do something about it. Just two characteristics that we've seen of Ruth at this point. Very devoted person, very responsible and resourceful. And you'll see the values of those as we move ahead here. But in Ruth chapter 2, verse 4, we find that Boaz, the owner of the field where Ruth was harvesting, Boaz, the owner of the field, arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. And Boaz asked the foreman of the harvesters, "Whose young woman is that?" Because he saw Ruth and said, "I don't recognize her. Who is she?" And the foreman said, "She came back from Moab with Naomi." And Ruth had said to him, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." And she went out into the field and has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So that was the foreman's introduction of Ruth to Boaz. And we find in this another characteristic of Ruth is that she's a hard worker. She not only is resourceful and responsible, but when she goes to work, she does it well and is diligent about it. She's a hard worker. And we find in Ruth chapter 2, verse 8, so Boaz said to Ruth, okay, now he's been introduced to Ruth by the foreman. Now he goes to Ruth and he says this, "My daughter." He calls her his daughter. I thought he wouldn't do that of every young woman who's out there gleaning, but he calls her a daughter. He knows something here, I think. "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the fields where the men are harvesting and follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch you. So evidently she was attractive. I'm not sure how this plays out, but leave her alone, okay? And whenever you are thirsty, go and drink from the water jugs the men have filled. In other words, make yourself at home here. You're free to work and be a part of us here. And Ruth responded, this is in verse 10, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? I mean, I'm from Moab. I'm not a Jew. He said, I'm not from Judah. I said, and Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, her husband, and your husband, and how you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Now, all of this has taken place in one brief encounter that Boaz has with Ruth. He tells her, stay here, make yourself at home, go ahead and work, follow the other girls, the young girls that are working in the field that are out here. And Ruth is out. She said, I can't believe you. How do I deserve this kind of attention? And then that's when Boaz says, well, I already know all about you. And I said, well, I'm curious, how did he know all that? So it doesn't say in the text, other than maybe the foreman said more about her. But he says all about it. He knows about Naomi. He knows about the death of Ruth's husband, and that she left all of her family in Moab and came. He knows all this about her. And then he says, may the Lord repay you for what you have done. And we see in this a characteristic of Ruth, that she sacrificed for others. She was concerned for Naomi, didn't want her to go back to Judah alone. And she was alone, her husband had died. And rather than staying in Moab, the land and people and the culture and the language that she was familiar with and knew, she chose to go with Naomi. So that was another characteristic of the sacrificial heart for others. So Boaz invited Ruth to join him and his harvesters for lunch. Got this down? The time. It's morning. They're in the field, they're gleaning. Boaz shows up. He has this conversation with Ruth, and that we've just talked about now. And at this conversation, he says, I want you to remain and have lunch with the rest of the harvesters. And I'm going, she's got to say, what is this all about? But, I mean, what is she going to say? You're going to feed me too? And so he tells his men to leave some of the harvest for Ruth to pick up. In other words, they're out cutting the sheaves and gathering them out here, the really good ones that they want to keep. And so Boaz is telling them, leave some of the sheaves, the good stuff behind, so Ruth can pick that up. He's paying special attention to her and care for her. And Ruth worked until the evening and took home an ephah of grain. I didn't bring my wallet. I said, okay, what is an ephah of grain? Well, the documentation that I read is that an ephah is approximately 22 liters of something. Now, I don't know if you can imagine a liter bottle of soda. You've seen those, that, about this big around or about this tall. You know what I'm talking about? The liter. 22 of those is how much seeds she brought home to Naomi after harvesting that one day. That's 22 bottles of 7-Up. Full of seed. That's a lot of weight. a lot of volume of food. That could make a lot of loaves of bread. But so anyway, she brought all this grain back to Naomi, went back home to Naomi, and it also says that Ruth shared leftovers from lunch with Naomi. So she was thinking about her. Ruth was thinking about Naomi even while she was eating at lunch and brought some home for her. And then Naomi asked the question, well, Ruth, where did you work today? So what field did you go to? You know, it's just interested. And Ruth says, this is in chapter 2, verse 19, the name of the man I work for today is Boaz. And there's an exclamation mark here. It just says, Naomi said, the Lord bless him. She was, and I don't know if that's just because this man paid special attention to Naomi, or Naomi knows this man. But the Lord bless him. Naomi said, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She knows something about his history. His reputation is that he's kind to people. She added, this is Naomi, that man, Boaz, is our close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemers. He's one of us. We're one of him. And Ruth said, he even said to me, stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain. So Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean until the barley and the wheat harvests were finished. And she lived then with her mother-in-law. So she continued to do this gleaning in Boaz's fields for some time, through the whole harvest. And two things might be helpful. Naomi called Boaz, he is our close relative. What does that mean? And she also said, he is our kinsman redeemer. What does that mean? So I did my research on this. A close relative, the Hebrew word that's translated here, close relative, could have meant that Boaz was her late husband's brother, Elimelech. That Boaz could have been brothers, or at least they were from the same family. That's what a close relative would imply. So he's close to it, and Naomi knows him, and knows him from before, and knows him through her husband. They're relatives. And a kinsman redeemer, I don't know if you can track with me on this, a kinsman redeemer. A kinsman is a relative, a kin. You know, when we talk, we use the English word, we say, well, they're kin, they're family, they're relatives. So a kinsman is a relative, and a kinsman redeemer is a relative who redeems or restores. When I read in the New Testament and Paul talks about that Jesus has redeemed us, what is redeem? What did he do? Redeem. Well, the word to redeem in Greek means would be used if a man went to the slave market and bought a slave from the market and then set the slave free to be on their own. He bought them freedom. And that's a redeemer, one who buys somebody out of slavery or out of other possessions. So he buys them so they can be free. And so the kinsman redeemer is a relative who restores what was lost in a family relationship. He redeems. He has provided the way for Naomi to be restored to her family because she lost her husband and her sons, and she felt alone and felt that God was against her. And so here it is, Naomi is saying, Boaz is one of our family. He's one of our relatives. And he is our kinsman redeemer. He's the one who can restore us to to our relationship with the family here and our stature in the community, and can protect the property that is ours, that Naomi couldn't keep on her own. She needed her husband to keep the property and all that they had. And so Naomi is saying, Boaz is our protector. He is God's provision for us. He's the kinsman redeemer for us. So Naomi's pretty excited about all this. The text goes on, and I could keep reading. I almost thought about just reading you the 4 chapters, so that it stand on its own. So here's Naomi, not able to keep the family property, not being able to have the stature and ancestry and no future for her, who now sees Boaz as the answer. And as a kinsman redeemer, Boaz could buy Naomi's land. In other words, Naomi had ownership of the land but was not able to keep it. But Boaz could buy that land and restore her family heritage by marrying Ruth and having children who would carry on the family name and the heritage, so she would have a future. Both Naomi and Ruth. And it is helpful to know that Boaz was single and never married. And marrying Ruth would have children, and having children would leave both the family heritage for Boaz as well as for Naomi. So as the story goes on in Ruth chapter 3, verse 1, one day Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you will be well provided for?" I mean, I think you need to get married again. I think you need to have a family here. And then she says, "Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been working in, is he not a kinsman of ours? Is he not family? Have you considered him?" That's the implication. And so Naomi told Ruth what she should do. This is mom arranging an arrangement, a relationship here for Ruth. Anyway, she's telling Ruth what to do, and so she says in Ruth chapter 3, verse 2, it says, "Tonight, Boaz, will be winnowing barley." He'll be getting the husks off the seed of the grain that they cook during the day. He'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. "Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, and don't let him know you were there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down." Now, that's kind of strange in my mind, but it gets even better or worse depending on how you see that. In verse 7, Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, that's Boaz, and he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." Now, I read it to that far and I said, "Hey, this story's getting a little kinky." I said, how much more description is there going to follow in this? I think it's time for me to close the book and move on. I said, I don't know if I want to read this. Anyway, so I came down to that, and I said, and I thought maybe there's something here I'm missing culturally. And so I did some research on the culture of what just took place. And I learned that Boaz, being a much older man, could not pursue Ruth in marriage. That would not be culturally acceptable, because he was at least 20 years older than she. if he was in fact the brother of Amalek, who gave birth to a son who married Ruth, and they were together for 10 years. I'm guessing that the sons were probably in their at least late teens, early 20s when they married, and then another 10 years, they're pushing 30. So it could very well have been 30 years difference between Boaz and Ruth. And that would not, even in this culture, I mean, it happens, but they're going, well, that's weird. But so that wasn't an acceptable thing for Boaz to do, even if he wanted, if he had interest. He's unmarried. I said, even if he had interest in Ruth, it would not have been appropriate for him to pursue her. And I also learned that the phrase "spread the corner of your garment," that's like put your clothing over me. In other words, let's get close. I mean, that's what the implication sounds to me. But anyway, to spread the corner of your garment was an expression used to propose marriage. In other words, if a man wanted to propose marriage to a young lady, he says, "Come, gather under my garment." Now, that doesn't mean he's inviting her at that point in time. He's saying, "I'd like to be married with you. I'd like to take you in marriage." I mean, that's the implication of it. It's not, "Hey, let's get it on. Let's consider marriage here." And that was the thought, the expression. And what Ruth was saying to Boaz, "Though I'm as much younger than you, you may marry me. It's okay with me, it's appropriate for me to marry you." She's the one who made the statement, "Take your garment and cover me." So I thought all that little background and culture would be helpful to us in understanding what's going on here in this conversation. And Boaz's response to that was interesting. "The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier." I'm not sure what kindness he was referring to other than his speaking. She was speaking very well of him. "You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. You've considered me. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character." So we know something else about Ruth. Came from Moab with Naomi, living there in the town, providing for Naomi by going out and gleaning the fields. So the people in the town knew Ruth in that context, but the people in the town knew the heritage of Naomi and Ruth's commitment to Naomi. And so the people in the town regarded her as a person with noble character. She makes good choices in life. She lives a worthy life. She's honorable. And Boaz expressed his confidence in Ruth's pure intentions. He didn't pursue her at that invitation that night. Told her to remain at the night at his feet and leave early in the morning before everyone's there. I want to guard your reputation. Leave before this becomes the talk of the town. And it tells us why. Boaz knew that there was another man in the family line of Amalek who was closer and would be the first person in line to be the redeemer for Naomi, to look after Naomi and Ruth. And so the next day, Boaz talked with this man who was in the position to redeem Naomi and Ruth before him. And Boaz approached him. The man willingly yielded to Boaz and told him to redeem Naomi and Ruth himself. But what happened in the conversation. You can read it in the text for yourself. It's in chapter 4 there of Ruth. When Boaz went to the man and said, "You're the next in line to take care of Naomi. But if you take his property, you get Naomi and you get Ruth as well." And the man said, "Well, that would really complicate my life. I'm not going to do that." I paraphrase that a bit, but that's essentially his response. That would really complicate my ancestry, my history, my property, my family. Boaz, you go ahead and redeem her. And so Boaz did. In verse 13 of chapter 4, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become the son, may he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth." This son who is to come. This is a son to Boaz and Ruth. And do you remember what Ruth said to the women in the town when she first came back? "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Lord is against me. He's crushed me." And now look what's happened here. As the story completes, you see, now she's being redeemed, her property is secure, her life is secure with a family that's watching over her, and Ruth is taken care of, and there's now children, and there's a history to follow now. And he said that Naomi, who felt beat down by God, was experiencing the goodwill of God. The same goodwill that's described in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. For God causes all things to work together for good, for those who love him and are aligned with his purpose. When we choose to align our lives with what God has in store for us, what we know he wants of us, and we align our lives and do it with him in that, and continue to express our gratitude and our love toward God, everything that comes our way ends in good for us. God creates good out of the difficulties. And out of an absolute ruin of Naomi, God created a future and a history that lives thousands of years later, and we're reading about it today. Because she chose to follow God. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. And Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. So here's Ruth, a Moab, not a Jew, leaves her land, comes back with Naomi, is in Judah, in Bethlehem, just south of Jerusalem, here with the tribe of Judah, the Israeli tribe of Judah, and Perez, who was the son that all the ancestries that followed. And Melech was in the lineage line of Perez and Judah. He was of the tribe of Judah. And what's really interesting is here's Boaz, who's in the tribe of Judah, now has a son, Obed, who has a son, Jesse, and Jesse has a son, King David. So Ruth was in the lineage of the lineage of Judah that dates back to Jacob, that dates back to Isaac, that dates back to God's promise to Abraham that out of your seed will come the Messiah. And so that's the kind of fulfillment that God brought to Naomi in engaging Ruth. And I thought it was interesting. You know how boring a list of so-and-so begat so-and-so, father, son, you know, those things can go on for chapters. In Numbers, in the Old Testament, but in Matthew chapter 1, the whole first chapter is a listing of who was born to who. It is a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. I'm reading Matthew chapter 1. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, the rest of the 12. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of, and it goes down the list. And I come down to verse 5. Salmon, it looks like salmon in English to me, but Salmon was the father of Boaz. So Salmon was in the tribe lineage of Judah from Abraham. He's carrying the bloodline of the Messiah with him. Salmon is. And Salmon was the father of Boaz. And Boaz, and Salmon's wife, do you remember who that was? Rahab, the prostitute in Jericho, who kept the spies, and her life and the family was spared when the Jews conquered Jericho. And she became a part of the family. And she married, Solomon married Rahab, and they had Boaz. So now Boaz is marrying a Moab woman, Ruth, and they have a son, and his name is Obed. I'm reading here now. Solomon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. So a nobody became a part of the royal lineage of the promised Messiah to Abraham and to all the Jews. It was in the line of Jesus, who was the promised Messiah. And all I'm saying is that the character and how you live your life is important. The characteristics we see of Ruth, that she was devoted, she was caring, she was responsible, she was resourceful, she was the determined hard worker. She guarded herself, she didn't go chasing the men. She was sacrificial in her service to Naomi and to others in the story. And she was a woman of noble character. All of these are honored by God. And they're pleasing to God. They're characteristics and all the descriptions of those who are faithful to God. These are characteristics that surface. And I said, can I look after my life? And when somebody sees me, is this what they see? When God sees me, is this what He sees? And what choices can I make in my life that honor Him? And so I say, and out of learning from what we have from Ruth here, is to guard your life values, guard your decisions, and guard the actions of your life. Place high value on others. Regard others as more important than yourself. Be devoted, caring, responsible, resourceful, sacrificial, noble. And we all live our lives before God, who sees and knows everything and rewards us. And we all live our lives before all the people who know us. And even more, I think, we all live our lives with our own conscience. How do we see ourselves? And my encouragement is that you be as Joshua and Caleb. Serve the Lord with a whole heart. Live to please Him, and you will know His blessing. You'll know His provision, His peace, and His joy. Those are promises from God. And God was faithful to that, to Naomi and to Ruth. So that's the things I picked up out of Ruth. We'll see what other people we meet along the way here. But may these characteristics be a challenge to you as you reflect on your own life and what it is God can do in this, and we are agreeable with it.